Welcome, Richard, to Tinnacoid, our 28-acre nature reserve. On the right, you can't see, it's out of shot, some pigsties we re-roofed and made the most expensive swallow hotel in town. And over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about the management of the site and the recording of the site, which goes hand in hand with management, and for which we've had lots of help. I'm going to mention a few things, but I know I'm going to leave an awful lot out. And anyway, look forward to seeing what we can see.
Okay, well thanks James, that's great, and yeah, let's go.
I'm James Robertson. I have a small farm, Tavernather, in Llanfaniel, and this 28 acres, which we bought in 1996 at auction, because we knew how wildlife rich it was. So the last 25 years, I suppose, have been a learning curve in managing the site and recording what we've got on it and how to diversify and increase biodiversity here. So on this piece, which is our most species-rich grassland, our big management issue is Molinia, purple moorgrass. So we pony graze in winter, or latterly we've cattle graze to try and keep on top of it. But I've also taken to strimming, which is a little bit like gardening, but it is about managing the habitat, and that's really the key to this site, is to know roughly where we want to go, to get the ground conditions right, the variety, maximise variety, include a bit of dynamism. We've got to provide that in various ways, with cattle, with ponies, with excavators if we want to create scrapes and so on, and allow them as much variety, diversity of habitat as possible, and then let the species come in and do their own thing. So here we have a common carder on Succiser pratensis, the Devil's Bit scabious, which is one of our important species, which has spread during our management over the last 25 years. And it attracts a lot of autumn pollinators, such as some of the hoverflies, the bumblebee mimic, Arctophila superbiens, and there's that large wasp mimic, Seriacomia silentis, which is common here. And it's attracted to the nectar of the Devil's Bit scabious and some of the other flowering plants we have, but also it needs other habitat requirements like bits of boggy bare earth or ditches, and it's the matrix of different habitats that's so important. And sometimes in the autumn we really do have spectacular numbers of pollinators on particularly the Devil's Bit scabious, which is a feature of this part of the site. So when we bought the land in 1996, the big issue was how do we manage it, how do we graze it? And we tried a few arrangements with local farmers, ponies, nothing was very successful, and it forced us to buy our first cow and go down the livestock route and the farming route, which involves a lot of paperwork, I have to say, but it's so important. In 2001 we became fully organic on our small farm and on this land, this 28 acres, and the crucial thing has been to get it grazed down by the end of April and then let the flowers come on and flower. So we're reducing nitrogen, and one of the allies we have is a range of hemiparasitic plants. Everybody knows about yellow rattle or hay rattle, and that's now abundant in this field. There was very little of it when we started, but we also have two other hemiparasites that help suppress grasses and help the flower richness of the meadow. One is eyebright, and that has increased a great deal over the recent years, and the other is lousewort in the wetter areas, and that's also fantastic at suppressing grass. And alongside lousewort we get a whole lot of nice plants. I'll mention fleawort, which is one of my favourites, and that's expanded. So it's part of our raison d'etre is farming, is producing good food. We worked with Ponce and the Animal Grazing, Anglesey Grazing Animals Partnership. We marketed some of our beef in boxes through them. So farming is a very important part of the equation. But in fact, as the years go by, we've gone out of farming ourselves because of other priorities and getting older. So we've looked to other people to help us with the grazing, and the Kehoe countryside have been particularly brilliant in looking after this place for us with grazing animals.
Don't stand under it.
Lovely.
They're gorgeous, aren't they?
Fantastic.
So the calves are traditional Hereford crossed with these, which are commercial ones.
Yeah.
And then Rhiannon is a Simmental cross Swiss brown.
So here we are, even in October, with spikes of a cross between the hybrid between Northern Marsh and Common Spotted Orchid, full of seed, really enjoying the hybrid vigour of this cross. And this part of the field, which we haven't cut for silage or haylage, is the place where we've got the best population of Northern Marsh orchids, which came in 2005. We had the first one. We had about 20 flowering this year, plus a whole number of these hybrids between Northern Marsh and Common Spotted Orchid. So it just shows what can happen if you manage land, taking nutrients out, avoiding fertilisers, avoiding pesticides, herbicides, whatever, and grazing and taking fertility off in the form of silage or haylage. So we've got a nice population of the Northern Marsh orchid, the hybrids. Common Spotted Orchids are very common here. We've got sneezewort. We have a whole range of different plants that have come in to this part of the field. Where it's green, we've taken the crop, but it's largely the same. It's on a deep brown earth soil, so it's neutral grassland. It's quite herb rich, but it's getting better, and it's full of yellow rattle. It's full of greater birdsfoot trefoil, a whole range of herbs, and it looks a real sight in June, early July. Here are our other three habitat managers. They've been down in this piece of rushy pasture for getting on for 3 years, taking the rush down, gradually opening up lawns around some scrapes we put in, and they've allowed the habitat to change, so we've got about 5 separate types of habitat here, from the rush, the tall herb, the short grassland and lawns, the bramble areas, and scrub, incipient scrub and trees coming through. So all thanks to these 3 managers doing a super job for us. We call this field Caicanol, Middlefield, but it's actually marshland. It's shown on tithe maps as marsh. And it's got a really nice marshland fauna, avifauna with sedge warblers. We see barn owls over this sort of habitat. There were water voles recorded here. Great crested newts apparently been recorded by some environmental recorders looking at DNA. I only see palmate newts, they're common. In this particular area we've opened this up and it's going to taifa, which is the problem with opening up scrapes, which are really primarily for dragonflies, because the star here we have scarce bluetail damselflies, which are quite a nice biodiversity action plan species. So we need to have a succession of different open water, so that in maybe 3 to 5 years, every 3 to 5 years, we have to create a new one, or dig out the old one, or it'll be lost. But this one is the largest, and it's always in summer full of emperor dragonflies, 4-spotted chasers, broad-bodied chasers, and a whole range of damselflies. Here's another scrape that we put in February 2019, and it looks good as new, and we hope it's going to host some of the stars of this site, which we only know about because of the Bioblitz day, when specialists came and looked at all aspects, including spiders. So we have the ray spider here, which is a tiny silver spider that uses the surface of the water and plants to put its to nest on, and I think Richard said it's at its northernmost location in Britain here, more or less, and it's turned up at 1 or 2 other sites on Anglesey, but it's quite a speciality. And the Bioblitz Day has given us knowledge of all kinds of invertebrate groups that I hadn't got a clue about, like spiders, which is wonderful to know. And there is this resource out there, a resource of expertise, and there is a resource of management. And there are groups who get together and look at sites together. The Habitats and Meadows group, for example, in North Wales, has done a wonderful job linking people up who have a bit of land. They don't quite know how they're going to manage it, but they want to do the right thing by the land, and they want to have lots of nature around them. And the Habitats and Meadows group is a wonderful introduction, really, to different people, different sites, and linking people together. Another thing that we've done here, which is very satisfying, is to have had people come in and harvest the yellow rattle for road verge schemes. So we've had that done several years. This year it's going to be the Carnarvon bypass, but that's not actually happened yet. I think the road scheme has been running late. But it's very nice to think that a bit of the wildness of this site is transferring to other places, because there is this sense I have after 25 years that give nature the right conditions, put in a bit of dynamism, because without dynamism you end up shutting places up in a state of neglect, which is about the most unnatural condition you can imagine, without any grazing animals or any big animals or anything. There's nothing natural about neglect, and you lose everything but your secondary woodland and your brambles and your ivy and a few thuggish species. So habitat management is quite difficult, and over the years it's given us quite a lot of headaches and also a huge amount of joy and pleasure and fulfillment, because you're always finding out new stuff, you're always discovering new plants and animals. Here, I mean, the list is endless. I should be mentioning all sorts of other species which have come in, like bog pimpernel, for example, one of my favourite plants. We only knew it from one site, it disappeared, then a few years on it cropped up in here, but up the edge of one of these scrapes, and now it's on the edge of another ditch as well, and it's doing really well. It's a very small plant with a flower that seems to be out of proportion to the leaves, very attractive. You probably know it. It's not uncommon, but it's very nice to have. So there are a whole range of plants that have moved into this wet lens of a marsh, really. It's like a cup on its side, a saucer on its side, with a lens of peat and a thick layer of clay and water coming in from the surrounding area, and also it's spring fed. So it's rather nice to have spring fed water, and I'm sure that helps explain why it's so rich in dragonflies. We put in this scrape at the beginning of 2019, before COVID, and it's been quite dry since, so it's stayed really open. There are two species of water forget-me-not here. There's a range of plants. We've just discovered one of the potamogeton, the fine leaf potamogetons. This is a small pondweed, which is rather nice. There are always things coming in, appearing. Nothing ever stays the same, and it's remarkable really how much change there is and how many good things come in if you get the basics right. So in 2 or 3 years this will begin to be swallowed up by typha and other larger plants, and we'll have to create another scrape. So here we are in the rough, as we call it, which is an area of rocky outcrops and wet basins that has defied all agricultural improvement. And when we bought it, it had last been grazed by ponies 6 years earlier, and it wasn't properly fenced, so it took us a long time to get fencing in so that we could graze it again, because this is a whole matrix of habitats and it's becoming dense woodland, or it was when we took it on. And we can see by monitoring particular populations how opening it up with cattle and with ponies has brought a lot of things back to life. It's brought the heath back to life. So things like Erica tetralix, the cross-leaved heath. We didn't see it for the first 15 years we owned the place. After ponies came in and stirred the ground up, it popped up, and now it's in good numbers, and bell heather is in good numbers. It's spread, it's on all the rocky outcrops now which are open to the sun. So by taking trees out, by grazing, and occasionally clearing particular bits like the Millennia basin here to my left, we've been able to increase the diversity of habitats, so that our small population of early purple orchids down amongst the trees sat at around 20 flowering plants each year from 1996 to 2014, and then 4 years after we introduced grazing, which is the lifespan of the early purple orchid, it grows, its first leaves come up a year after it germinates, and it doesn't flower for 4 years at least. Numbers started to increase, so we can see confidently that our management has led to a dramatic increase in the population, which is, this year it was 112 flowering plants, so more than 5 times as many. The cowslip population has boomed as well, So by looking at particular populations and the management, we can see that what we're doing seems to be achieving good things and variable things, unexpected things as well. One of the plants we're pleased to have in the bog on the left is Narthecium bog asphodel, unusual in this sort of lowland Anglesey site, but it disappeared under the willow and birch scrub. But we introduced pony grazing and it popped up again, so we now have a small population of bog asphodel, which is very welcome. Here we have bog asphodel in fruit, orange coloured, and it's in a little matrix of sedges, and there's Devil's Bit scabious and Molinia and some rushes, and there isn't very much of it here. The sedges are also really good indicators of things being healthy, what we want. Particularly here it's tawny sedge, Carex hostiana, that's the star, and there's also lots of flea sedge, Carex pulicaris, which is a lovely little sedge which looks like the fruits look as though they are fleas on a stem, and it's very small, but it's been doing extremely well. So we've got new populations in here and in the main field that we walked through. This section was completely covered in trees when we bought the land 25 years ago, and there are some tree stumps you can see where we've taken the birch off and let the light in. But our biggest allies have been the cattle and initially ponies, and the ponies have stirred things up and they nibble things down, so they control the bramble to some extent. The cattle do a different job. They push into the blackthorn, into old senescent blackthorn, and they knock things down, they open things up. So the combination of ponies and cattle is really good. So this very, very broad track, which was part of a drover's route, we think, where stock were taken down to the river, across the Bright, onto the Menai Strait, and then swum across. And it's really sheltered, so we get really good invertebrate lists. And Ian Hawkins came and moth trapped with his son Sam in 2014. I think that was the first time we got a moth list, and it was a really good list, including some local species like August thorn, and that's turned up at every time we've had a moth trapping session, either here or at our farm at the other end of the village, about 1.5 miles away. So we get a lot of butterflies, really good for butterflies, lots of sedge warblers singing along the edge here. There's a lot of cover, so it's another useful piece of habitat to add to the fields and the rough. Great, okay, well I've really enjoyed showing you around, Richard. There's always so much more to say, and it's just great to be out, isn't it?
Oh, certainly, and we've had the weather today, and it's been fantastic to be shown all the different habitats and the management work that you're doing on site. That's really nice, and yeah, thanks once again, James, for sharing your experiences and knowledge of your site with us, and hopefully inspiring others to do the same on their land.
Well, it's been a real pleasure, and if it inspires one other person, then that's fantastic.
Brilliant. That's all we can hope for.
Yep.
Okay.